Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and uplift others who are struggling through dark times. Now, a quick reminder that you can hear this show anywhere you get your podcasts. If you happen to listen on Apple Podcasts, we invite you to leave us a rate and review. Otherwise, feel free to shoot us your input and your feedback and thoughts at road to rediscovery podcast at gmail.com. That's road to rediscovery podcast at gmail.com, and we'll give you a shout out in a future episode. My special guest has forged a hard road as a homeless teen who's made a living holding various roles in the service industry. She is now a personal finance expert and money coach. Her heart lies in the financial education of those in the service industry. She's the author of Tipped, the life changing guide to financial freedom for waitresses, bartenders, strippers, and all other service industry professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Barbara Sloan to the show. Barbara, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Aubrey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Oh, likewise. So am I. So I have to ask if you can just start us off by giving us a glimpse into your journey that I don't know, set the foundation of and maybe even spark the idea of pursuing what you're doing today. What was that journey like in those earlier years?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'll start with where I am now, and we can kind of work backwards.
Sure.
Most people who meet me today know me as somebody who owns a women-owned and operated construction in Manhattan. But what they don't know is that I spent 20 years working two career paths in tandem. And that was construction in the day and service industry at night, or dirt in the day and dirty in the evening, as I like to say. And so those early years, most of the time I was only working in the service industry.
Hmm.
You mentioned in the intro, I had some housing instability when I was a younger person, and that caused me to move around quite a bit. I traveled when living in different states. And so whenever I would move to a new state, I would get a job in the service industry, because one of the big perks of the industry is that it's pretty easy to get a job.
Right.
And so it's one of the industries where it's very you can get a job pretty quickly,
Yeah.
especially if you have experience. And so I relied on the service industry in a number of cities, from Detroit to Los Angeles to Las Vegas to Boston to New York. I worked all over the country in so many different roles. I was a bartender, a go-go
Yeah.
dancer, a stripper, a fetish performer, a sideshow showgirl. I was a cater waiter, I was a flair
Mm.
bartender. I mean, you name it. If it involved tips, I probably did it for a living. And so having that broad experience, um, it made me feel as though I had a good connection to the overall community,
Yeah.
and I had a big variety of experience. And so in 2013, when I moved to New York City, I got two jobs. The first job was working at a bar called Coyote Ugly. And the second job was working on Wall Street for an unregulated market. And
Mm.
that was a huge education for me, because I learned a lot about financial services, how predatory it was. I learned a lot about the markets. And that was sort of one of the moments where I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
like, this doesn't work for people necessarily. And
Right.
so
Right.
I lasted there about 6 months, left that job, and I was like, it's way too toxic for me. And
Uh-huh.
so I went and got a job at a construction company. It's actually the construction company that I now own. And I was tasked with putting together the HR department and accounting department. I had never had HR before. So this
Mm.
was a huge, huge lesson for me in benefits. I'd never had a 401k or Yeah, I
Right.
maybe had health insurance once before. I had never had a, paid time off policy or even a human resources person. I had no idea what they did. And so
Yeah.
as I started to do all this research into these benefits and these systems, like this aha moment where I was realizing that the people who worked in my industry didn't have access to these financial services and this education. And they also didn't have access to these employer provided benefits. And I
Hmm.
realized that this was a big reason that people in the industry were being left behind.
Hmm.
And 2016 was sort of another pivotal moment for me in that we all know what was happening politically. There was a lot going on, and I couldn't stomach the news cycle. So I turned
Yeah.
everything off and I just started deep diving personal finance content because I was like, I can stomach this. It's educational. I can make some big changes in my life. And it really started out as something I was going to just do to be able to save more money for myself so that I could donate to the causes that I cared about.
Right.
And realizing and seeing this huge umbrella of personal finance and seeing nobody talking to people like me, I was just like, and here's another place where these people are being left out of the
Yes.
wealth building world, left out of getting access to this information, just totally left out. And for a long time, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, who am I to write a book? Who am I to
Hmm.
educate these people? I don't have
Hmm.
a college degree. I don't have any credentials. I don't have
Hmm.
a platform. I didn't
Yeah.
have social media accounts that were blowing up or anything. But I realized somebody needed to do something and I could at least be one voice. And
Mhm.
that's how we got to the book.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And I want to thank you, Barbara, for overcoming those challenges and those weird little voices that speak in our ears. About who are you to write a book, who are you to be an authority on this topic, and that sort of stuff. That can be very quite difficult to overcome. And so your resilience in persevering and continuing to stay the course towards writing the book um, was what was the source of that? Just the was it just the fact that you have observed on more than one occasion that this is a demographic that is not getting this type of education? Was it out of frustration that people should be getting this type of awareness, but they're not? What where'd that resilience come from to get you to put aside that bad dialogue about imposter syndrome?
I think it came from personal experience. When I was
Yeah.
15, I came out as gay. When I was 16, I was kicked out of my high school.
Mm,
I had to go find another high school. That high
yeah.
school was, right outside of Detroit. It wasn't a great school system.
Right.
Um, I realized when I graduated and I didn't have the money for college that if I was going to learn anything, it was going to be because I had to teach myself. And so
Right.
I started on a reading list of 100 books. And like, I just sort of have always had that, well, nobody's going to give it to me. I'm going to have to give it to myself.
Yeah.
And I just sort of wanted that for the people in this industry. I was like, nobody has given us anything. Most of the people in this
Mhm.
industry have worked and clawed their way for everything that they have. And so much of financial services is filled with jargon and it's meant to gatekeep and keep people out.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, being a career bartender, career waitress, I'm
Right.
good. I'm good at talking and connecting to people. I'm good at storytelling. I'm good at
Right.
making things approachable. So I
Mhm.
can take all these skills that I actually learned in this industry and then the 10,000 plus hours of deep diving personal finance, and I can combine them and I can do it in a way that's entertaining
Mhm.
and I can do it in a way that speaks to this industry. And so
Mhm.
that was those were the big pieces where I was like, I listened to a podcast and somebody was just like, write the book you wish you had had. And I was like,
Yes.
I can do that. I can write a book for 20-year-old me that could have
Yes.
saved 40-year-old me a decade.
Totally. Totally. That is extraordinary, Barbara. My goodness. And and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but um, why do you think this is a demographic that is not um, included in this awareness, initially or traditionally?
So there's a lot of different reasons why people are excluded, and that's one of the first chapters in the book is you're
Yeah.
excluded and here's all the reasons why. I have my own opinions on that.
Hmm.
Two-thirds of the people in this industry are women.
Hmm. Hmm.
Industries that are filled with women, there's not typically a lot of advocating for higher wages or changes in the industry, right? So we
Right.
see that in education, we see that in healthcare.
Right.
Um, it's also a demographic that's filled with minorities
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people who don't have access to money or education or other
Right.
things. When I was doing research for the book, I realized in digging into the numbers that service industry professionals age into the most economically disadvantaged people in our country. And it's because they're left out of one of the biggest safety nets that our government provides, which is Social Security. Social
Yeah.
Security is a partial income replacement benefit that is based on claimed income.
Yes.
Well, one, when you're already low income or middle income. Two, you're in an industry that's not educated and doesn't understand the correlation between claiming your income and
Yeah.
those benefits. And
Yeah.
so when you realize things like, oh, in 2020, the average Social Security payout was less than $20,000. And then you realize that this industry isn't even claiming their full income, that they'll not be on the receiving end of that. The numbers
Mm.
are atrocious.
Wow, that is atrocious. That does sound atrocious. In fact, Barbara, as you were mentioning that, I kind of picked up on two just just overwhelming irony, um, um, uh, pieces of irony that just I don't know. It kind of startled me. Okay, number one, um, I would think that. Uh, while those in the service industry, say at the worker level, may not have the awareness or the education or be included in that type, financial education, um, you have those in the service industry who are at the, say, restaurant owner level, or maybe they have a restaurant or two or a string. They're in the service industry, but I guess at the level in which they're at, they may be among the circles of those who are who are financially aware. I don't know. The second
Not in
piece of
my experience.
no, okay, okay,
Majority of service industry purveyors are small mom and pop businesses who
yeah.
have also foregone setting up retirement accounts for themselves because they sink everything they have into these businesses that they love.
Amazing. Okay, so it's perpetuated then, right?
Mhm.
Because I would think if they had that knowledge, they would pass it on to those who are working, for them and to keep their restaurant or bar, alive and going. But it sounds like they are mom and pops that didn't have that type of um, education or awareness, and so, like you said, they sunk all their retirement, mortgaged their home, and all this stuff for the business. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that clarification. The second piece of irony that kind of startles me is just the fact that, by virtue of fact that um, the paycheck is not the same amount every week or every 2 weeks or semi-monthly or whatever the frequency is in the service industry. At least my small exposure in the service industry, selling shoes and working at a restaurant. um, and so, because there's tips and everything, um, it to me that begs the need even more for, teaching someone how to manage their finances, in such a way to where they can maintain a quality of life, have a savings, and keep things steady, even though their paycheck may be, up and down, sort of.
100%. Yeah, no. And this is a big part of what I talk about is that you have to be more educated because
Hmm.
you are essentially a small business owner when you're in the industry.
Hmm.
You're doing everything that a small business owner does.
Hmm.
You are managing the beginning, middle, and end of a transaction. You're doing sales. There's lots of interpersonal connections. You are running all of these resources, and
Yeah.
then you are living on a variable income and having to put all of these systems and any benefits you get in place for yourself. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to be, unfortunately, you have to be more educated and you have to act like a business owner. And you are the only person who's going to protect yourself. But the
Hmm.
positive side of that is that it is possible.
Yes.
It's very possible for you to put employer benefits in place for yourself. It's very possible for you to save on a fluctuating income, to budget on a fluctuating income. It just requires a little more diligence and a lot of reframing because 99% of the personal finance world is geared towards 9 to 5ers and our
Right.
financial lives just look very different.
Right. Right. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. It very much can be done. And that's a huge part, I'm sure, of the education in your book, right? Do you touch on? Let's talk about your book for a minute. Do you touch on the mindset of someone in the service industry? Now, we know that there are certain characteristics a person should have for a certain job that they're in, like someone in sales, right? They got to have a personality where they can easily accept rejection, and persevere. And I'm sure, those in the service industry, you have to be personable and social and courteous and, product knowledge and that sort of thing. But are any of those virtues that people in the service industry would have, would be a benefit to them, or give them an edge or an advantage, in the mindset they should have for maintaining their finances, even though it's a fluctuating income?
Yeah, this is such a good question. The book's broken
Mhm.
up kind of like a sandwich cookie,
Okay.
right? So
Hmm.
the top layer is sort of like why you're left out, the
Hmm.
ugly side of it, all the things you miss out on by being in this industry
Yeah.
and environment. So we
Hmm.
talk about all of the environmental hazards. Most positions, industries, jobs, you get training on the hazards that you encounter. This
Yes.
is not an industry where you get training on the hazards. And there's a lot of hazards in this industry. You just touched on one really important one. We deal with the general public. They chip away at your confidence so
Hmm.
much,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Those insidious
Yes.
questions of like, what's your real job? What are you doing after this? Like
Right.
they have a way of chipping at your confidence and that can negatively impact you. And so you have to learn to put those protections in place. So some of it is environmental, putting boundaries in place, learning how to set yourself up within your workplace, avoiding those hazards, whether it's, understanding the constant exposure to alcohol, narcotics, to, you know, maybe gossipy or
Right.
difficult managers, right? And then the middle of the book is all of the tactical stuff. We're talking retirement accounts, we're talking how to invest, we're talking how to set up these benefit systems for yourself. And then we tail end the book with reducing risk and
Yes.
mindset. And mindset is, in my opinion, it's the last chapter, it's the most important chapter because if you
Hmm.
feel
Hmm.
like if you feel scarcity, if you feel like you're never going to have enough, you're never going to start the process of saving. You're never going to start the process of investing.
Right.
You're never going to be able to put these things in place because you're going to be too scared that they're going to be taken from you. And so
Yes.
overcoming scarcity is the biggest hurdle and the most important one. And the reason I love talking about mindset is because largely it's a free endeavor, right? And so for people who are just
Yeah.
starting out and maybe are working their way out of debt or, they don't have a lot of, excess in their financials right now, I'm like, that's okay. We can start with mindset because mindset, we can do a lot of stuff with no money,
Yes.
right? We can focus
Oh,
on things
yeah.
like our identity, right?
Yeah.
So much of our identity is, oh, I'm broke or
Hmm.
I'm a spender or
Hmm.
I'll never be good with money. Our language, just like anything else, is a resource and we have to
Hmm.
learn to be good with it and good to ourselves. So maybe you're not a saver, but you're saving.
Right.
right? I'm in a
Yeah.
wealth building stage. I'm learning about personal finance, right? So adopting the mindset of somebody who, if you just started investing, you're an investor. Adopt those positive identity, you know, markers. Second
Right.
one I love to talk about is mantras.
Hmm.
Mantras, when I was working in the service industry, my favorite mantra was money comes easily and frequently, because it
Mm,
did. It came easily and frequently when I was working in the industry. So I would
right.
adopt that mindset. The third one is gratitude. It doesn't
Love it.
cost you anything to be grateful for what you have. And
Totally
this
agree.
one's really cool because it does a trick to your brain. When you're focusing on what you have, you're not focused on what you lack. And that's pushing you into an abundance mindset. And that helps you to
Yes.
adopt all of those other tactical
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And the final one is charity. And charity doesn't have to be monetary. It can be time, it can be energy, it can
Hmm.
be, a bag of clothes that you don't wear anymore, right?
Right.
When
Right.
you are giving to others, it is putting you into an abundance mindset. You are thinking, if I have enough to give others, then I have enough. And that is
Yes.
so important.
Oh, incredibly important. Those are all virtues, virtues in which, once exercised and implemented, you know, authentically, genuinely, I don't know. To me, the universe just responds tenfold in so many good ways. Having that heart for service, giving of your time, or monetarily, or any way you can, to a charity, is you're not just looking out for yourself, but you're looking out to help other people. And I love how your book touches on those. And mindset is huge. I just learned of a new concept when I was in San Diego last week for a conference called Dharma, and I'm not totally uh, uh, um, knowledgeable of it. Okay, but I took copious notes, and Dharma talks about that abundance mindset that you touched on, Barbara, and being in the present moment, which mindfulness and present moment I've always tried to practice. Dharma touches on some other stuff. That's another conversation, but it. When you said abundance mindset, it reminded me of Dharma, and having that abundance mindset, that is the total opposite of the scarcity mindset, right? Like you mentioned earlier, is one of the toughest hurdles to get over.
It's the absolute toughest. And when you have a scarcity mindset, you really, it's almost impossible to get rid of fully. You kind of
Yeah,
always have it. You're constantly having to work on it, right? It's something
yeah,
that you have to constantly address. Oh, no, that's scarcity sneaking, and I have to,
mhm,
work on that. You touched on something beautiful, which was like mindfulness and meditation, and those are things I also talk about in the book because
beautiful.
they're things that teach you patience. And when you're
Yes,
in this industry, you need patience in order not only to survive your shifts, but to have a long term career, right?
yes,
The general public that you deal with in
hmm,
these clubs, bars, and restaurants, especially when people are oftentimes at their worst,
yeah,
under the influence, or maybe having overspent, or
yeah,
having the encounters they're having. You need that patience in order to do your job and to
yes,
protect yourself and to make money, right?
yes, absolutely. You truly do. I love it, Barbara. I love it. I mean, this is great, and I have to commend you for just picking up those signs, right? And that's what the road to rediscovery is about. You've discovered and rediscovered in numerous circumstances and situations that uh, this is something you should learn financially to benefit yourself, to help yourself. And then you pick up in another experience. We're not being, people in this industry aren't being taught that. I'm glad I know it. And then it just kind of blossoms into the work you're doing now and the book that you wrote. Absolutely, absolutely tremendous. Um, what I had a question regarding just some of the how does someone who is going through the book, or someone in the service industry trying to get on their feet, deal with adversity, And this may be a little bit of an overwhelming example, but the pandemic. There's a lot of service industry related establishments that that took a hit on that, and just trying to survive, at that point. And maybe that's too big of an example, but
The
what are some of the
pandemic's a
things that
great
help?
example.
Is it
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, it's a
Okay.
great example because so much about life is learning to be flexible
Yeah.
and taking those hits and picking yourself up off the mat. And the pandemic was one where we all kind of got flattened, right? We
Yeah.
lost the industry. I remember 2008, right? Like the whole financial world was a mess.
Yes.
I
Yes.
was working in bars. There was no recession for me. I was making the best money of my life in 2008. We
Right.
thought
Right.
this industry was recession proof, but here
Yeah.
comes the pandemic and it's
Hmm.
another example of there's no such thing. You
Hmm.
always have to be prepared. And so the pandemic for me is a great example of telling people like, yes, there is you do have access to cash pretty easily. You can get a new job pretty easily, but not always,
Not
right?
always.
And so that
Yeah.
emergency fund that I talk about, there's a chapter where I talk about building an emergency fund. It's even
Yes.
more important for people in the service industry for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
One is that there's a power imbalance when you are serving somebody,
Yes.
right? And so you cannot be totally financially reliant on one person's tip because then you aren't able to keep yourself safe. And
Right.
so you need to be able to have savings to rely on so that you can protect yourself and say, no, actually, I'm not going to wait on this person, or I'm not going to let them into my establishment, or I'm going to talk to a manager about asking them to leave. And so that's a huge portion, a huge reason why emergency savings is so important for people in this industry.
Hmm.
The other thing is like our industry, when you aren't claiming your income in full because you don't know how to, or you aren't
Right.
tracking, right? Like this is
Right.
another thing. Like
Yeah.
people who get 9 to 5s, they don't understand that you get a W 2 at the end of the year. This is how much you made. People who work in this industry, if they're not meticulously tracking, which so many of
Right.
them are not, then
Right.
you roll into H&R Block being like, I don't know, how much do you think I made?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when you aren't claiming it, you don't have access to things like unemployment, which is what a
Hmm.
lot of people need during things like the pandemic. Luckily, our government provided that booster, but that
Yeah.
was the only money that people got. A lot of
Wow.
people had to pivot into different industries, and that shows the resilience of this industry and how skilled this industry is as a whole, that so many of them were able to transition and pivot. And that's something I talk about, is being able to understand that you're very skilled when you're in
Yeah.
this industry, and those skills, not that anyone should feel the need to leave the industry, but if you do, you can harness those skills to reposition yourself in any industry.
Oh, without a doubt. And in my view, the reason why I believe that and feel that is because in any industry, you have to deal with people. And in the service industry, that is the hallmark of someone's role, to know how to relate to people, know how to interact with people, understand, people, and hold a conversation, be courteous, and be able to detect some nonverbals, those sorts of things. So yeah, I don't know. I'm in talent development industry, and so we call those transferable skills, or
Yes, a
but
100%.
yeah, yeah, and it's important to have those, right? And you have those when you're in the service industry, some more than others, I understand, but it's something that you really can't sustain a job in the service industry if you don't have the ability to be social and courteous and professional. So, um, yeah. So, are there any other reasons, Barbara, why um, you know um, um, it would be important for someone to coming out of service industry if they say due to the pandemic they need to go or they go into a different like line of work, um, uh, why that would be so important for them outside of just knowing people, working with people?
Why they would want to leave the industry?
No, not
Or
why they would want to leave, but if they had to leave, or even if they want to leave, yeah, if they want to leave, and they would have an edge or an advantage to thrive in whatever line of work they're in. Is there anything outside of just working with people, knowing people, that gives them that chance to thrive?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about somebody who's coursing a meal or somebody who time management is a huge skill set that
That's
you
true.
gain
Yes.
when you're working in the service industry, understanding how
Yes.
to course things,
Yes.
when you're serving people alcohol, understanding how
Yes.
frequently you've been giving them drinks, right? So you are
Mhm.
constantly running that. You're doing constant back of the envelope math. So think about it
Yes.
from a financial point. You're like, all right, I've got these four tables. I've got, they're each ordering $30 entrees. That's going to be,
Right.
like you're constantly running numbers throughout your shift. You're great with numbers when you're in this industry. You're figuring out exactly how much you're going to make and whether or not it makes sense for you to take the early cut or the late cut and how
Yeah.
much like there's
Yeah.
so much math in this industry. So it's time management, it's math, it's understanding how to use resources, not only like your guests, but your management, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
understanding how to use that as a resource for you and your guest and the establishment. So many times I was a security staff, I was de-escalating very serious and scary situations,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, your quality control, quality assurance, right?
Yeah.
You're checking the products that you're giving to people. You
Mhm.
are problem solving constantly, right?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you wanted to transition to pretty much any industry, you can find a transferable experience within your service industry experience that is relatable. You're going to be a project manager, 100%. You've probably done inventory, right? You've tracked and counted all of the stuff in the back. You've done opening and closing side work. You understand how to check people out. So you're managing people yourself, right? If you're a bartender, you're managing a bar back. If you're a waitress, you're
Yes.
managing a bus boy.
Yes.
You're checking in with the hostess, right? There's so many transferable skills for people in this industry. I don't have any skin in the game. Stay in the industry, leave the industry. I don't care, but get into the best financial footing you can while you're here.
Yes.
That's my game, right? That's what I
Yeah.
want to teach people.
100%. Makes that sums it all up. I was going to ask you for my last question. I was going to ask if you can sum up one message, primary message in your book that you want all in the service industry to hear and know. If it's anything you get out of this book, it is what?
My favorite chapter is the investing chapter.
Okay.
I love it because the entire chapter is an analogy to being at the bar. So if you understand what it's like to be at a bar, you're going to understand how to invest by the time you're done with this chapter. I
Gotcha.
like to say that investing is like wine. You can get so deep into wine. You can talk about the years, the
Yeah.
regions, the
Yeah.
tannins, the mouthfeel, the notes, the
Mhm.
body. I mean, you can get so deep into wine.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to get deep into wine to have a great wine experience. You need to know a little bit about your tolerance and what you like, and you can have a great wine experience. The same is true for investing. You can get so in the weeds with investing. You can get so deep into investing, bell curves and puts and calls and forex
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nonsense, right?
Right.
But
Right.
you don't have to get that deep into investing to have a great investing experience. Again, you need to know a little bit about your risk tolerance
Yep.
and what you want. And you can have a great investing experience. You can have a great retirement. And so to me, it's like it's giving people those tools and letting them know that it is so possible for them.
So, Barbara, that's beautiful. How can the listeners learn more about the great work you're doing, pick up a copy of your book, and connect with you?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. The book is available on Amazon. You can type in tipped
Hmm.
book. It's available in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. You can connect with me on the socials. I'm available at Tipped Finance on all the socials, or you can reach out to me on my website, tippedfinance.com. I do one-on-one coaching. I will come to your bar, restaurant, or club and give an employee talk.
Nice.
Yeah, reach out to me. I love, even if you're just in the industry and you have a couple of wins, I love to see and hear about people in this industry succeeding. So please share your wins with me because I will get so excited.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome, Barbara. Awesome. We're going to make sure and have all of your socials, email, website, all those links will be in the episode show notes so the listeners can click the link, order that book, connect with Barbara while listening to a great conversation here with Barbara. So, um, Barbara, thank you once again for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate having you here, sharing your insights to an underserved community who I think and I feel in time, in a short period of time, will turn that around. I mean, you'll turn that around with your great work. Thank you.
With help of people like you, I so appreciate what you're doing. Thank you, Aubrey. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, likewise. I truly enjoyed it as well, Barbara. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And hey, look, if you have a loved one, a coworker, a friend, a neighbor who just doesn't seem to be themselves, maybe they're going through dark days of despair, not quite sure where to turn or who to turn to, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them because on the road to rediscovery, we want our listeners to know two things. Number one, you're not alone. And two, there's always hope. The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life, and it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have.